Good afternoon. It's time for another Campcraft lesson. I'm John Auten, the RA consultant with Kentucky WMU and Kentucky Royal Ambassadors. And this week, I wanted to remind you, first of all, about our lesson from the very first week of the month. We talked about Jesus and the feeding of the 5,000. We looked at the story found in the book of John, chapter 6. Verse 11, which was the memory verse, says, "Then Jesus took the loaves and gave thanks. He handed out the bread to those who were seated. He gave them as much as they wanted, and he did the same with the fish." In the story just before that verse, Jesus looked out across the crowd, and the Bible tells us that he wanted to know how they could feed them. He had concern for them. He had compassion for them. And when we talked about that the first week, we made some trail mix, and we talked about the little boy in the story who had the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and how he had gone out that day prepared for what he was going to do, for having lunch with him wherever he went, and how he was willing to share that lunch with Jesus, and Jesus in turn worked a miracle and fed those 5,000 plus people. And this week, as we think about that, I want us to focus on the compassion side of that. Jesus being concerned for the people, Jesus having compassion for the people because they were hungry. And as I thought about that, I was reminded of a mission story. This mission story is found in our Campcraft manual right here. And as I've told you each week, that can be found at www.kywmu.org/campcraft. So that's where we can find this book, this manual with all of this information in it. And the story I want to read for you today, the mission story, is found on page 14 up at the very beginning. And it says here, Bob Dixon, a Royal Ambassador Campcraft instructor, was the first person called to help organize a response to Hurricane Beulah in 1967. Hurricane Beulah hit land just very near to Brownsville, Texas, which is down near the very tip of Texas, there on the Gulf of Mexico. Bob was returning from a weekend Campcraft training session with a load of Campcraft gear. He cooked meals on the back of his station wagon using buddy burners. As responses to disasters continued, Bob called upon other Campcraft instructors to help. These men possessed the knowledge and experience to use their outdoor living skills to help people who were affected by natural disasters. Southern Baptist Disaster Relief was born from Campcraft. So that's a really neat story. It talks about how using a buddy burner, Bob Dixon, a Texas Campcraft instructor, used those buddy burners set up on the tailgate of his station wagon to feed the people who were hungry. When I read this story, I see in Bob a sense of compassion for those people who are hurting and hungry after the Hurricane Beulah here near Brownsville. And he took what he had, he took what he knew, the skills he had, and he went out and helped those people. He didn't work a miracle, but he did something pretty amazing, I think, in using those little buddy burners to feed those people. And that's what I wanted our Campcraft lesson to focus on today, was making our own buddy burners, so that every time we use that, we can be reminded about Bob Dixon and what he did at that time, and how we too can have compassion on others. The information for how to make a buddy burner is found on page 93 in the Campcraft manual, and you can download again that manual for free. The buddy burner, making the buddy burner, fulfills one of the requirements for the Discover 3 patch in the Firecraft area. So what is the buddy burner, you may ask? Well, I'll show you real quickly. It has 2 parts. One, it has the burner. This burner, that one's used. You can see how blackened it is. It's been used a couple of times. And then that's the burner part. And then this is the stove part right here. And so we're going to talk about how to make one of these. The things you need, first of all, for the burner, you need a tuna fish can, emptied out and cleaned, just like that, regular size. You also need some cardboard. And I've got mine here already cut and ready. I don't know if you can see that. I'm a little bit shadowed right there, but anyways, there's my cardboard. You also need to have some paraffin wax, and I have my paraffin wax on the other side of my computer. I'm going to switch that camera view. So you see there, I've got my camp stove, and it's hooked up to a propane bottle, and looks like I need to turn it back a little bit. So in that pot, I've got some water, and then I also have a can like you would get vegetables in or fruit in, just a regular size can. And I've put some old candles in there. And so there's water in the larger pot. There's candles made from paraffin wax inside the smaller can, and that smaller can is set down inside of the water. That's called a double boiler. If you try to heat up the can of wax directly on the heat, it can cause problems. That wax can get too hot. It can burn. If you spill some of it, it can catch fire. So this is a much safer way of melting wax with a double boiler. There's some other things out there in craft stores you can find to melt wax, but this is the way I've chosen to use, and my wax is inside that can. I'll show you that in just a little bit, but I'm going to switch back over to the other side. All right, so I've got my tuna fish can. I've got some cardboard. I've got my wax all melted over there in my double boiler. And so what I want to do with the cardboard, a real basic thing you can do is just take a strip of cardboard that fits inside the tuna can from one side to the other, and just make a little star out of it. I've made a little star out of mine, but then I went on and added a couple extra cross pieces. The cardboard serves as your wick, and it soaks up the wax and then serves as a wick to burn off that paraffin wax. Um, the more cardboard you have, the hotter it gets. The less cardboard you have, the cooler it burns. With just one cross of cardboard, it'll burn, but it might take a little longer to cook. I've added a couple extra pieces there. And this other one that I have here, I don't know if you can tell, it's so dark, but there's a coil of cardboard in there. So there's much more cardboard in this one than in the one I'm getting ready to make. And this one burns very, very hot because that whole surface of cardboard on the edge there will burn and heat up the stove. So you take your tuna fish can right here, and you put your cardboard down in there, and you want to cut it so that it comes right to the top edge of that tuna fish can. And then when we put wax in here, we're going to fill it up so that it's a little bit below that, maybe like a quarter of an inch, eighth of an inch would be the smallest amount, somewhere in between an eighth and a quarter of an inch. Fill that wax up in there, and the cardboard soaks that up. Now, when you work with hot wax, obviously you want to protect yourself, and also what we're going to do in here in a minute. So you want to have a pair of work gloves to use when you're working with that hot wax, and to protect your hands. So I've got some work gloves here. The other thing I use is a pair of channel lock pliers. This allows me to reach in there and get a hold of that can of hot wax and pour it into the tuna can. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to switch my camera back around again. Can't do that with my gloves on. So you can kind of see what I'm doing. So I've got my tuna can there. That's going to be my burner. It's got the cardboard in it. I'm just going to reach in and take hold of that can of hot wax. And then I'm just going to pour it inside of here. I'm going to stop right there. Don't need that anymore, so I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to set this can down here so it can cool off. Make sure when you use a camp stove like this, you turn it off here, but you also turn it off back here at your bottle. Make sure it's turned off here as well, so it's turned off in both places. All right, now I'm going to let that cool right there. So that's how you make the burner. And I'm going to show you how to make the stovetop. For the stovetop, which is this part right here, you need one of these. You need a number 10 food service can. And the first thing you're going to do, you're going to take a mallet. I've got what's called a dead blow mallet here. You could use a wooden mallet. And you're going to want to just dent the top in just a little bit. It just gives you a little depression here in the top, so while you're cooking bacon or something, that grease will collect there and not run over too badly. So that's the first thing you do. The next thing you want to do, you want to take a can punch like this right here. They call these a church key, and you can use it to open a bottle with this side or punch into a can with this side. But instead of punching it into the top, we're going to punch it into the underside of the top. And you just want to put 3 or possibly 4 holes on the underside of the top. These are vent holes. You just take the can and you just punch it in like that. And I'm just going to put 3 in for now. This provides some ventilation there in the top of your can. Now the next thing you want to do is you want to take your tuna can, and I have an extra one here for this purpose, and you want to take a Sharpie or some other kind of marker that you can mark on this can with, and you're going to mark this can with this tuna can because you need to be able to slide the tuna can through this gap that we're going to create right here. And what I do, I just lay it across, so basically the circumference of the tuna can is touching either side of the larger number 10 food service can. And then I mark outside of that spot there just about a 1/4 inch, maybe 1/2 inch, like that. And do the same thing on the other side. And then I want you to notice on this one, the tuna can is only about that tall, but I've had to cut almost another inch up above it. And that's because when you bend this back, if you cut right at the top of the can, it's not going to work very well. You have to have extra space so you can bend this all the way up out of the way. Then you take a pair of tin snips, metal shears of some type. And RA leaders, if you're doing this with your boys, the initial cut through the thicker edge here, you may need to help them with that in cutting that part because that's the toughest part to get through. Then you just cut up. I'm going to use my other one kind of as a gauge. Here again is another reason for wearing these work gloves, because when you cut the metal, obviously it's very sharp. Sometimes it's hard to work with this, so you maybe need to cut both sides and then start the bending up a little bit to give yourself a little room to cut it a little bit higher. I still need to extend my cut just a little bit further up. There. Now you see I've got my two cuts. There's one and there's the other. And then the trick always with this is because it's already curved this way and we're trying to bend against that, that's where the biggest challenge is in bending these back. Just kind of have to bend it back like that. You'll notice once you bend it that these corners stick out, and so you can, if you want, take your channel lock pliers or another pair of pliers and bend those corners back so they're not sticking out. Try to make it safe, keep the sharp edges away. All right, so there you go. I've made my stove top. I've got my vent holes on the back side here, and then I've got the opening for my burner to go in. That'll slide right in just like that with it sitting flat. And when you use these, you want to put them on a surface that will not be bothered by heat. So on gravel, on a piece of metal, you can use some old wood. If you, now, like I've got all this set up on my picnic table, I wouldn't want to do it on here because it would probably char and blacken my picnic table a little bit, and I don't want to do that. But there's, if you got a very bare spot with just bare dirt or a concrete block or something like that, you can use that. The other thing I want to tell you about is when you use these, you can cook right on top of this surface if you want. But a really neat trick that I learned from one of the RA leaders in Texas one time while I was down there, they said they take foil and they take the foil, and I'm going to use my sign here kind of as an example. They take the foil and they shape it down around the can like this and form it to the top of the can. And then they take it back off and they flip it upside down so that they end up with like a foil pan. And they can roll the edges down a little bit so that they can work with the food they're cooking. But they use that foil as a means to cook in. One, it keeps the top of your surface cleaner. If you look at the other one I have, you can see that it got a little bit dirty there, but it'll help keep it cleaner. The other thing is when it's time to put it out, you can just, with your gloves on, obviously, pick up this foil out on the edges with the hot grease in it, set it aside to cool, and then once it cools, you can just crumple it up and throw it away. So I'm going to switch my camera again, and I'm going to kind of show you how you would use this in practice. So you can see my other burner over there. That one obviously cannot be used. It's still not cool yet. But if I was going to be doing this, I would have my can like this. I've got my old burner right here. I would light that burner. I'll just show you what that looks like real quick. I'm not going to leave it on long. So then you've got your burner going there, and you would simply slide this up underneath there like that. And that whole can, not only the top, but the whole can will heat up. You can lay a slice of bread right in here and toast it. You can cook bacon, eggs, hamburgers, hot dogs, any number of things on top of this. Now, when it comes time to put it out, I've got a family-sized tuna can here that was given to me by my friend David Bowie. And so what I would do, I would take that foil off with my grease in it and set it aside to cool. And then I would take my channel lock pliers and grab the edge of this right here and lift this off and also set it aside to cool. And then I would take my tuna can and turn it upside down and grab a hold of it by the little rim here and set that down right on top of there and snuff out that flame. And there you go. And so that's a great project you can do with your RA boys. And obviously, if you want to do this with your RA boys, you'll want to collect some number 10 cans and some tuna cans. The tuna cans are pretty easy to come by because you can just go and buy tuna fish, and your family have that, or have the boys collect it if they eat tuna fish, and make sure you get an even number of the small ones and the larger ones so you can have the burner as well as the larger one that you snuff the burner out with. Number 10 cans, you usually have to get those at places like Sam's or Costco's or whatever, but a good place to find them, if you have a contact within your local school system, they use those size cans all the time, and you might get them to collect you some, and they'd be able to collect you 10 or 20 of them in fairly short order, and you could save those up and get ready. And then great thing to do is use those, do this project on a Wednesday night or a Sunday evening whenever you meet, make your buddy burners, and then when you go camping, the next time, you can have each boy use his own burner and cook his food, cook breakfast on it, cook dinner on it, any number of things. And so they're a great project. The kids love to do it. Obviously, they need a lot of supervision, particularly with the younger boys, or if you've got some boys who are a little bit energetic, you want to keep a close eye on them. But it's a great project to do that RAs have been doing for years and years and years. And of course, it's a great reminder about how these campcraft skills we use and learn and use, how they can be put to work on the mission field and in mission settings, just like Bob Dixon did back in 1967, using a bunch of buddy burners to feed hungry people after Hurricane Beulah. We too can use our buddy burners and our campcraft skills to reach out and help people who are in need. And when we do that, we are living the way Jesus has called us to live, reaching out and ministering to those who are hurting, to the hungry, to the sick, to those who are lonely. We can use our campcraft skills to do this kind of mission work. So that's our campcraft lesson for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and you have a great day.